Hello, Guitar Smarts fans. Before you check out this podcast, I want to make you aware of a cool new place where you can interact with other Guitar Smarts listeners. It's a Facebook group called the Guitar Geek Hangout. That's where we hang out and talk about all things guitar. So, if you like the Guitar Smarts podcast, come and chat with Kiran and myself over in the Guitar Geek Hangout on Facebook. Maybe check out some pre-podcast clips and even get involved in asking and answering lots of questions from the other page dwellers. Hope to see you there.
Bonamassa actually uses a higher gauge of... I think he uses 11s on his Les Paul, which is a heavy set of strings. Yeah. But he said, because I top wrap them in this way, they don't feel like 11s, they feel like 10s. And he's right, it feels so slinky doing this. So something for listeners to experiment with. Genuinely, it's a thing.
Greetings, welcome back to the Guitar Smarts podcast. Remember, if you're an everyday gigging guitarist, this is the podcast for you, and maybe your friends too, so please tell them about this podcast. This week we continue our 3-part look at the best way to fine-tune your action on your guitar. Last week, Kiran took us on a deep dive through adjusting the truss rod. This is the device in the guitar neck that allows us to set the relief or the curvature of the neck, and it allows enough space for the springs to vibrate above the frets. So step 2, and this week's topic, is the guitar's bridge. This is where the strings pass over the saddles and are stretched across the neck to the nut. So how do we set the saddle height correctly? What can we do to adjust them, and what types of bridge are there, and how are they adjusted? So as well as all this, we have our usual drawn-out catch-up at the beginning of the podcast, talking about things that have happened in the past week, and I've got a little rant about the Silver Sky guitar from PRS again. Anyway, housekeeping, remember to like and subscribe to this podcast on your preferred podcast app. That way you won't miss the next show. Use the LinkTree in the description of this show to get to our Buy Me a Coffee page. Links to some of our Spotify playlists, social media pages, especially the Guitar Geek Hangout page on Facebook, where you can interact with Kiran and myself and many other guitar nerds just like us. And if you really want to support us, use the links to leave us a rating or a review. This is the best way to support us because it helps us to grow and it helps us to get into the ears of more guitarists just like yourself. Anyway, have a great couple of weeks. Remember, if you've got any comments or requests for the show, you can reach out to us through our social media pages. That's about enough from me. Let's get to it. Oh, how are you anyway? You all right?
Yeah, really good. Yeah, good, man. Had a good gig last weekend with the band. Actually, no, we had a band rehearsal last weekend. That was good. We got some new songs in the set. I'm enjoying these ones. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it like completely new stuff for you? Is it like you've never gigged it before?
Yeah, I've never gigged it before. And I'm enjoying that. It's good. It's good. I'm not surprised that I'm enjoying it. It's always nice to do something new, but we chucked a bunch of songs into the mix, and they're working out all right. So yeah, I just had a quick bash through on the 335 as well this morning. Had a little play on that. I haven't played that for ages. It's a really nice guitar. I need to play that more often.
It's a beautiful piece. It is an absolutely gorgeous instrument that you've got. That 335, but yeah, it needs to be played, doesn't it? Oh, does it?
It does.
Oh, does it? Who am I to say? Maybe I'd be the same. I've got a beautiful Gretsch behind me that I've always wanted, and actually, I barely touch it.
See, there you go.
I need to play it more often, really.
Play it more often. Yeah.
Yeah, part of the reason why I don't really touch it is because I don't really play in the day. If I play guitar, I tend to kind of noodle around late at night, and because it's a semi-acoustic, it's like, I don't want to wake Daniel up,
no.
or anything. I don't want it to be too loud in the house, but
yeah,
I do need to play it more often.
A little midnight noodle.
A little midnight
with your semi. Yeah. Terrible. Right.
Anyway, mate. So what's new? How have you been this week? Anything interesting? You've what's in the guitar news world for you this week that's interesting?
Well, one of the things is the thing that you just sent me, actually, which is a bit of a breaking news alert.
Yeah.
The Court Fat 2s have come down in price.
Yeah.
which we talked about a little bit beforehand, hadn't we? As an exciting, exciting guitar, super versatile, loads of different tonal options. Kind of had that kind of session guitarist vibe going on with it, and from the underdogs that you and I love, which is Cort. I mean, we say they're underdogs. They're not. They're just a huge manufacturer of guitars and do some beautiful kit. They're not underdogs, but underdogs insofar as, it's not a Fender or a Gibson for people to jump up and down and get excited about. But we certainly thought they were beautiful guitars, and they've just had a price crash, right?
Well, it seems to be that way. I mean, we've always loved that Fat series, the Fat 2, the Fat 1 and the Fat 2 are fantastic guitars. I kind of refer to them as like the poor man's Music Man Luke, because they're that kind of thing, same kind of style, same kind of look and feel, but also... it has its own innovations as well. But it's that kind of thing, that kind of session players, multi-purpose guitar. It's not necessarily styled in a particular genre or anything like that. It's obviously a player's guitar, but it's still a beautiful guitar. But it's come down in price. And do you know what? The same thing happened with the Fat 1 before the Fat 2 came out.
Yeah.
And on Cort's Instagram page, they have just in the last couple of days started announcing a new lines of guitars. So there's a new
there's a Fat 3 coming.
Of guitars. Well, they haven't announced a Fat 3, but they have announced so in the G range, so that's the G290, the Fat 2, but in the G range there's a G250 Spectrum come out, which is meant to be a bit like a Kramer series kind of thing, a bit of a 80s rock kind of thing. That looks really cool. And there's a new range of G200, which is kind of their entry-level Pacifica kind of looking thing, humbucker humbucker single coil with more colour options, and that looks good. But if you have a look on like Cort's Instagram page, you'll see they're announcing, they're in the middle of a stream of announcements at the moment, so they're announcing new instruments every day. And I really love Cort guitars. I think they make superb stuff, and lots of other people think Cort make great stuff as well. If you own a PRS SE, you own a Cort guitar, effectively.
Well, it's true, isn't it?
In a way, it's made in that factory. So, great guitars, and interesting to see what else they announce, because they're innovative. That black guitar, that one that you got for your son that we saw at the music show last year, the guitar show.
That's right.
Beautiful instrument.
Well, it is a really good bit of kit for the money as well, and some decent hardware and stuff on there. I was in a guitar shop just this week, actually. I had a little time to mooch around a guitar shop this week, and I saw some Corts in there, and with price tags which I wouldn't normally associate with Cort.
Right.
Well, hold on. Let me take a step back. The first thing that caught my eye was the guitar, and I thought, wow, that's beautiful. Plug into Google the Cort X700 and click on images, and you'll see what comes up.
Oh wow! This is kind of like a. I don't know. Is it a metal guitar? Is it like a metal style?
All I can tell you is in real life, it looked absolutely beautiful. So
it's like it's made of layers of wood, right? Is that?
Yeah, it is. Right. It is. It's exact, and it just looks stunning. And they had it in a few different finishes. So you'll probably first and foremost see the one that comes up, which is kind of like I think it's called like an ice burst or polar ice kind of blue color.
That's the perfect description.
Which is kind of cool. But there's also one which is called lava burst, which is kind of got some red and brown hues going on, and they do it in a few different finishes. But the first thing I thought was, wow, what on earth? What on earth is that guitar? And then I looked at the headstock and saw the price, and it was getting on for like £800 to £900.
It's not cheap, is it?
I was like, whoa, that's not cheap. And it's a Cort, but I was like, it's absolutely stunning. And I think it's got the Fishman Fluence as well. So yeah, I think I need to check these out a little bit more. I mean, it's a pretty expensive piece of kit, but It's not Murphy Lab money, is it? It's not a Murphy Lab guitar. It's not a type of guitar that would come out of Murphy Lab. It's unnecessary to pick on Murphy Lab so early on in the show. Sorry, Murphy Lab. That was that was like comparing apples and pears, really.
It is really old rotten ones.
Stop it.
I'm sure there's some listeners out there that are probably saying, "Oh, I like this podcast," and they're sat there playing with a Murphy Lab guitar whilst listening to us and realising that I'm not into that kind of thing. But again, it's kind of you can buy an actual vintage guitar for Murphy Lab money. That's the argument. End of. Sorry, I'm not going to go down that road.
Moving swiftly on. So
Cort X700. That looks really
looks pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
There's a couple of different versions: Duality 1 and Duality 2, and I think it's this Duality 2 that's got these Fishman Fluent humbuckers in it, which are supposed to be pretty nice. Anyway, there you go. On the subject of Cort guitars, things that have excited me this week that I've seen.
Awesome. Hey, do you remember I was talking to you about my rig ideas last week? The multiple.
Do I remember? I remember the incredibly detailed PowerPoint presentation that sadly our listeners didn't get to bear witness to, but kind of did vicariously through me. But you missed all the diagrams and flow charts and wiring schematics. But there was 10. There was 10 innovative combinations of rig that could be had by you substituting one Headrush FX FRFR speaker for a Line 6 Catalyst. So
that's right, yeah. Well, do you know one of our listeners, Jerry, who was commenting on the Guitar Geek Hangout after that episode, he also mentioned another great idea for another FRFR solution, which was the Line 6 power cab. So actually, if you've got a modeler and you have to solving this problem of getting a decent guitar-like cabinet, Line 6 do actually have a range of products called the power cabs. One of them is, I think, a 1x12 that you plug straight into from the Helix, and it actually has some of its own cabinet IRs built in, so you don't have to do that in the Helix, which means you save DSP, which means you can have more effects, and that's a really good way of doing it. And they
is it a cheaper alternative then, presumably, to running like a full-blown... It isn't.
It isn't. It's more expensive than the Catalyst. So that's the main reason for me why I probably won't go down the power cab route, is because I don't think I could buy it without investing some more money on my own. And me, I like to do one in, one out. I like to see what I can do with the money I get from what I can sell.
I love that.
Because it's like some kind of economical game to me. You know what I mean? So
it's like keeping that kind of net zero with your expenditure on your rig, but constantly chopping and changing stuff out without really having to spend too much money. I think that's a great way of doing it. I mean, it's like literally the opposite of guitar acquisition syndrome, which is me just buying stuff, trying it and going, it's quite nice, I'm not going to use it, and it will just sit on a shelf there gathering dust.
That's it.
Which is pointless.
One in, one out policy, like a decent club. So that's the main reason I probably won't go for that. But it's great advice from Jerry, which is that's another good product I don't think we mentioned that's a great alternative for people looking for an FR type setup for the modelling rig that feels more like an amp rather than a PA speaker, which will feel different. So that was a great shout, Jerry. But yes, I did have a think as well about this rig. I'm just still definitely going ahead with it. I've got the Headrush on for sale, but I thought of another super complex rig idea, which I'm going to try.
I'm probably never going to turn me off it. Super complex. Oh, it just fills me with anxiety. Super complex. The Helix itself is already too super complex for me.
It is very complex. Oh, actually, there's another thing. Thanks to Jerry, again, who on a different comment on the Guitar Geek Hangout pointed out a great resource online from, I think, Sweetwater in the US. They've created their own document that you can purchase, and it is kind of like a user guide for the Helix, but broken down into to a bit more of a usable fashion. But another good shout there. But yes,
does it not come with a manual then from Line 6?
It does have Line 6 do the usual pilot's guide thing, which is actually really, really helpful. But
this takes it a step further, doesn't it?
I think so, yeah. This takes it a step further, for sure. And just is a bit more kind of context specific, maybe, and the questions that people would have had after the pilot's guide came out, I think it tries to answer that. So, very helpful, useful resource then. But yes, so what I was thinking was, what I didn't think when I spoke about those rigs was, what's the most complex rig I could put together? Could I use everything? And I realised I can't. I probably can, which is to use the Line 6 helix.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Would you?
I want to. I want to use the Line 6 helix and the Digitech RP1 at the same time. And what I want to have is my Digitech RP1 in the effects loop of the helix, so that I can access if any of the Digitech RP1's effects or presets as a separate block in my chain of effects in the helix, right? And I want to be able to MIDI control my Digitech RP1 from the helix so that I can change it depending on the snapshot or the preset. I can basically have all the effects from my Digitech RP1 accessible from the helix through that loop and control it through MIDI. And then I thought, well, the RP1's also got MIDI through as well as MIDI in, which means it can be part of a daisy chain of MIDI controls. So I thought, well, why don't I also then MIDI control the catalyst so that from the helix I can have presets that change maybe the amp model in the catalyst or like the master volume, but also select new effects from the RP1. And then the next preset can be, it does something different to the catalyst and the Digitech RP1 at the same time. And I just thought, that sounds so incredibly complex, but fun. At the same time.
It's like a maths problem that needs
exactly
solving. You want to figure out, can I do it? I mean, would you use it? Should you use it?
Probably
who knows?
Not.
But could you do it? Is the conundrum.
Sorry to interrupt this conversation. However, if you're a regular listener, then you should definitely come and join us on our Facebook group, the Guitar Geek Hangout. You can interact with other listeners of the show, engage in general chit-chat about guitars, music, pedals, or just share images of your guitar collection for everyone to look at. Regardless, it's the next place you should visit online. Go and join the Guitar Geek Hangout on Facebook. Do it now before you carry on with this podcast. I'll wait here. Welcome back. That's the thing. Could I make it work? Yes, I could make it work in like a laboratory. Would I want that level of stress at a gig? No, I don't think I do. But saying that, that Digitech RP1, it's got some sounds that I just can't get in the helix. Like clean, compressed stuff.
Not
genuinely.
Not possible.
Like if I want to get can you imagine kind of like a Prince clean sound, something he would have used, like where it's clearly where he's gone straight into a mic pre in the desk, he's DI'd, and it's got this super compressed, utterly clean sound, it's not going through an amp. I can't figure out the best way to get that in the helix, because you have to really put your guitar through an amp. There isn't really an option. There is a like a channel strip option, but it doesn't give you that sound. But the Digitech RP1 has got presets that just sound like utterly perfect and pristine, and have got that kind of super compressed attack, and it's got some of the most beautiful, clean and chorus sounds you can imagine, because it's that kind of early 90s, kind of technology anyway, where everything feels so kind of digital and processed. And you know what I mean? You would have got your Zoom 1010, that kind of thing.
I had it in I borrowed off a friend. They had at the time, it was phenomenally expensive, I think at the time, but this Elasis Quadraverb. It was like a rack mount unit thing. And I remember plugging that in, and just like the chorus and clean sounds that came out of it were just ethereal, like these super 80s kind of sounds, which have gone out of fashion now, I guess. So they'll be there in your Helix somewhere, but it's just like...
Mate, they're coming back. Those sounds coming back. You listen to bands that are big now, like the 1975, on the Weekend, stuff like that. Not necessarily people... I like the 1975 a lot, actually. I think they're great, but a lot of the other ones I'm not super into. But the 80s influence is big in those bands now. Just listen to John Mayer's last album.
There you go.
Those sounds are coming back for sure. And maybe I need to just get the Digitech set up for gigging. I don't know. It would be a laugh. It would be a laugh, to be fair, to go out just once, to go out to a gig with and use that Digitech P1 for all my sounds and just see if I could make it work, just for my own amusement.
It's only for your own amusement.
Yeah. There's nothing professional about that at all.
There's something kind of cool about it, though. Rocking out an old 80s, 90s Digitech pedal board as your main part of your signal chain.
Built like a tank, though, mate. Honestly, it's not like one of those little plastic things. It's like a solid metal. It's crazy how durable it is. It could definitely withstand proper gigging, but
I'm gonna have
I don't know. It's a little piece of history and something I always wanted, so I don't know if I want to ever take it out gigging, really.
No, because if that breaks and something goes in it, who's going to repair it?
Nobody. I have to send it to some kind of historian. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right. Keep it. I am going to do some recordings for you of some of the sounds, though. If I do some recording some of the sounds and send you, so you can kind of get a feel for the level. I mean, we're talking full on the Toto, the seventh one. All those, that kind of thing. It just amazing.
Send it. It's going to make me get my old Zoom 1010 out, or even my Pod XT.
Yeah,
it was just sitting here, just hasn't been used or gigged in years, years and years.
It's screaming out to be played. That's what it is.
I don't know. Do you know what? I'm so happy with my pedal board and setup at the moment. I just don't feel the need. But yes, it served me well for many years. So who knows?
What guitars are you gigging with at the moment, Matt? Are you still gigging the Les Pauls?
So the main gigging instrument is the kind of tobacco burst Tokai Les Paul.
Nice.
And I take the American Fender Deluxe Strat as the backup guitar if I was to ever break a string. Which, touch wood, it's been years since I've broken a string or had a guitar failure on stage. So invariably, the guitar I start the gig with is the guitar I finish. And I'm surprised I don't, because I bend strings like crazy and, jump around a little bit here and there. But I'm amazed that I don't break strings, but I don't really touch wood. So I take the Strat more. It's not a sensible choice as a backup to the Les Paul, because everything would need to be changed on the amp EQ, even the amp input, because my Blues Deluxe has a high and low kind of level input.
Yes,
and I would need to use a different input for that for the Fender, and then all the pedals would need to be redone. So the sensible option would be to take the other Tokai Les Paul or any number of the other humbucker or Les Paul guitars I've got, and just have that, because then it would be a simple thing to switch out and change guitar. So there you go. Top obvious tip for your second guitar. Make sure it's something similar to the first guitar, because if you do need to grab it in a hurry and plug it in mid-set, then you don't have to mess around with too much.
This is true.
So why am I taking the Fender Deluxe Strat out with me? The only reason being is, this is the most un-rock and roll thing I'll say today, but I feel like at some point, hasn't happened yet, thankfully, it's gonna get fatiguing playing like a Les Paul all night for 2.5 hours. And so the Fender, the Strat, is light and sits a little bit higher up when I play it. Gives you some
relief.
And it just will take the pressure off. So the only reason I take it out, really, it's not really in case I break a string, although it is there for that eventuality, but it's more often if for whatever happens, I'm knackered after the first set, and I'm a young inverted commas. I'm a middle-aged but middle-aged guy, so it's not like I'm out of breath after the first set. But it's just in case I think, you know what, I just want an easier second set, so I'll just quickly during the break switch everything over to the Strat, plug that in. I think it was it Justin Hawkins I was hearing talking about this the other day on his YouTube channel. The Darkness guy. I love his YouTube.
Yeah, I do too. Stuff. I enjoy listening. He's very, very, very insightful.
He's really insightful. And he was doing a thing on John Mayer's playing the other day. And I thought he was going to be a really, really satirical and really, I don't know, just take jibes at, and pot shots at John Mayer. But actually, it turns out that he's a huge Mayer fan and loves John Mayer's playing, and was just trying to explain to people the beauty of his phrasing and approach. Anyway, while he was talking about this, he was talking about, you know, the tones that he's getting from his Strat, and then for what might be a lay audience for some of his listeners, he was just explaining the difference between, you know, a Strat and a Les Paul in terms of
what, like sound or feel or
both,
right.
Sound and feel. Yeah, he was like literally like this is a Les Paul. This is, you know, often what I play, and you know, you sling these things low, and you know they are you know. They're monsters. They're rock machines, and you know you pound around on those and you know just create a hell. And I'm paraphrasing his.
Yeah, but I can so imagine him saying that. I do.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He just said this is an unrefined beast, but it's wonderful for all of that kind of stuff. But you know, he said in order to get this kind of soulful, melodic, this is a Strat effectively, and this is why it's beautiful for that.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, so I don't know why I take out such extremes of guitar to one gig, but yeah, I guess I like having that option if I feel like playing something different, and if the mood captures me to play Mr. Brightside on a Strat.
Don't say that. How dare you.
But invariably, mate, I'm just loving gigging the Les Pauls at the moment. Because they just put me in the mood for being raucous.
Yeah. Well, good.
So, there you go.
Good. If it just puts you in the mood for the music that you're playing, that's awesome. But I've got a question.
Fight a little bit. Makes you fight a little bit.
Well, there you go. Les Pauls do that, don't they?
They do. You got to fight with them a little bit. Even as slinky as they can be set up, you got to fight with them a little bit. Whereas my Strats, it's just there's no barrier between my head and fingers and the guitar. It's just effortless. They just flows.
Yeah, I think it's something about a single cut guitar that kind of makes you feel like, it hasn't given you full permission to go up that past the 14th fret. Do you know what I mean? It's like if there's a compromise, it's kind of like, you know, I've got one eye open kind of thing.
Exactly. And don't wear me up. Don't wear me too high with your Strat, because I'll look stupid and I'll make you look stupid. So you're going to have me slung a little bit lower than you normally would, and that's also going to make you work to play me. And by the way, I've got a shorter scale length, so don't go putting 9s on me because it'll just be pointless and feel flimsy. So you're going to have to at least put 10s, maybe even 11s on me, which is also going to make you fight me a little bit more. But do all those things and great things will happen. That's the inner monologue of a Les Paul.
That's it. And I know you want that. I know you want the guitar to be a bit quieter, but hey, guess what? Flick over to the other pickup. You need to adjust a different volume control, sunshine.
Exactly. Yeah, I was speaking to one of my friends who's just like, I just hate Les Pauls. I'm like, why? He's like, the pickup selector switch is in totally the wrong place. And then you got 4 knobs, and he's like, I still can't remember which one is which. And it's just like, I don't need that hassle. And he's a pro musician, right? And he's just like, that's why I hate Les Pauls. The design of it is just, he's like, but my Strat, everything's here. It's underneath my hand. There's the pickup selector switch. There's the volume controls and tone. Why do I don't need to go from here to here. Yeah, I know. He's like, why does the Les Paul make you work?
Yeah. It really does though. But that gives you, like you say, it's like you get more. You've put more in with a Les Paul, so it's almost like you get more out, isn't it? But I've got a question for you, because I was watching something. No, it's okay. Something popped up on social media the other day. It was an old clip of John Mayer first talking online about the Silver Sky when it first came out back in like 2018 or 16, whatever it was.
God, has it been that long?
Yeah, I thought it was longer. But anyway, he was saying, you know, a lot of you are asking, is it just a Strat with a PRS headstock? because yes, it does look like this, but he's like, so the answer's no, and he talked about a few reasons why. The main one being, do you know that PRS like cutout that you get in the in the thing? He said that changes the dynamic completely, and blah 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 blah. Talking like John Mayer does, which is to use more words to say more stuff than he needs to say. And but anyway, as much as I love his music, I do also think he's a bit of a daft sod. But I wanted to ask you, being a man who's recently tried both. You've tried both the SE, haven't you, and the actual one. I know you were disappointed with the US one, but is he right? Is it not just a Strat with a PRS headstock?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, did I play it and go, this feels different, and the reason it feels different is because of this beveled edge on the cutaway. Not that I noticed. Not that I noticed.
Okay. I don't know why I'm finding it so funny. Because I knew all along. I almost feel stupid for asking.
Wow.
It's like, of course it's a Strat. Of course. You idiot. Why are you even asking? It's a Strat.
No, but this is the question that should be asked, right? Because clearly when it came out, and we're not Silver Sky bashing, it's an incredible guitar by all standards, and provided you get one that's properly set up, then they're a dream. And the SE version is actually a really decent guitar. But that was the whole kind of media thing in the guitar world when it came out, was it's a Strat with a different headstock. And he'll have been media briefed by the team at PRS and his own team within an inch of his life to reactively handle the question. What do you say to people that say it looks like a Strat with a different headstock?
I know.
Well, talk about the neck radius and talk about the custom wound pickups that are vintage spec but to your own kind of thing, and talk about the beveled edge and talk about the scratch plate that's slightly different, and try and talk about all the differences that cumulatively will when you say them all back to back, will make it sound like a completely different guitar when it's not really. And didn't I A-B'd it versus an actual Strat when I did one of the demos, didn't I, for you? Yeah. And I ended up preferring the actual Strat, I think.
Yeah, and also he went on about now there's no sunburst as well because it's a 2016 guitar. It's not a vintage guitar. We don't have sunburst anymore. Sunburst was something your TV used to be coloured and things like that. That's why they had it back then. So you're saying, so this red is actually a Tesla car colour. And I'm thinking, but Fender back in the day used to use Ford motor car colours for some of the things, like Seafoam Blue and things like that. Some of these colours were used because they were available in the car industry. So you're just doing the same. Sorry, anyway.
But bringing it up to speed, arguably, for the latest.
I just can't imagine that. Like his request to Paul Reed Smith when he wanted a signature guitar must have been 4 words. It must have been "Strat, please, okay, bye." That must have been it.
No, don't ruin the marketing. There were nights spent huddled over like an old oak table in the vaults of the PRS wood factory where Paul and he cracked open 18-year-old Macallan whiskey and smoked cigars and went backwards and forwards redesigning the guitar from scratch, only to end up with a design that was truly unique but harked back to guitars that had come before it in a beautiful marriage between the past, the present and the future. And all of those ghosts then visited them that night in a kind of Scrooge type fashion. And they realized that this was it. Guitar Nirvana had been reached. It was a beautiful night.
I have a different idea of what that night might have been like. I think you're right up to a certain point. Yes, late night, Wood Library, bottle of Macallan. Yes. Then what happened is John Mayer took out a Strat and put it on a piece of wood that was big enough to hold it and drew around it. Right? I think he got like a piece of chalk and he drew around it, all the way around it, And then Paul Reed Smith said, that's brilliant, but what I'm going to do, I'm just going to scrub out the Fender headstock. And he drew around a PRS headstock, but because he was drunk from the Macallan, he'd accidentally put it upside down.
He did it upside down.
So and then that was it. That's what happened.
Yeah, that was that.
And then we were thinking about what do we put in it. John Major said, "Strap, please." Okay, bye. There we go.
That's it. And then 5 a.m. rolled around. They realised how drunk they were. They'd run out of time. What do we call it?
Let's call it.
They just looked outside the window and there was the sun coming up, turning the sky a silvery colour.
The silver sky. Silver sky. Try not to say strat. That's okay. I want to call it the silver sky.
Let's just give it S. Yeah. Well, there you go.
Anyway, enough of that.
That was a nice bizarre origin story there, wasn't it?
It really was a bit of a weird origin story, but I can't help myself. Sorry. I had a moment this week where I saw this little video of him talking about it not being a Strat, and I'm thinking, it's a Strat. It's like you might as well have a cat in your hand and trying to tell me that it's not a cat. But anyway, sorry. So, Kiran, last week we spoke about setting up the action on guitars, and we went over in great detail about how to set up your truss rod and take measurements and things like that. It was super informative, and I can't wait for the next section because I know we're going through this in a few parts, right? We're looking at the truss rod, and we've done that now, and then what's the next step? What are we going to talk about today?
Cool. Okay, mate. So this is basically a continuation. This is going to be now part 2 of our 3 steps, which require a little bit more of what I'm calling like an intermediate level of confidence at maintaining your guitar. Obviously, harping back to the 8 steps of basic maintenance that we did way back a couple of years ago. So, as you say, mate, last week we did step 1, which was getting the right amount of relief in the neck. As your starting point to then start to really refine the action further. And step 2 is effectively the action at the bridge, which is what we're going to cover today. And then thirdly, which we'll cover in the week after, is going to be the action at the nut, which is, and these kind of steps 1 to 3, I've kind of suggested that this is almost the order to tackle these in. Mm-hmm. Certainly get your relief right. And then start to assess what the action is looking like at the bridge, because often or not, these are adjustments that you can then tweak a little bit afterwards. But we're basically lining things up to get it as close to perfect for the individual player as possible before we then start to adjust the nut, which in many instances, and I think it is within the realms of a lot of people to have a go at, even if it might make them nervous, taking a file to their guitar. If you follow these steps and at least have a go and practice it on a more inexpensive instrument, you'll realise actually this is pretty straightforward. But go through them in this order, and we'll get you up to the point where you'll feel right. Okay, this is pretty much there now, and if I just make a few adjustments if needed to the nut, then it's bang on. So today, mate, we're going to cover something that I'm sure you and a lot of our listeners have done before, which is adjusting the action by playing with the bridge, because people often get scared of truss rods, which we covered last week. So some people do it, some people don't. I think probably even less people adjust the nut slots for reasons we've just said around taking files to your guitar. But I think probably a lot of people have had a go at adjusting the playability of their guitar by changing things at the bridge, which is great. It's why they put screws on these things, so you can adjust them and see what happens. So but hopefully what we're going to do is share a couple of little tips or bits of advice and answer some of your questions around how to do it. If you've never done it before, or maybe a couple of little pointers for people that do it all the time, but kind of do it more by guesswork than having read up on how to do it. So that's what we're going to try and do. That's what we're going to try and do.
Awesome.
So, have you had a go at adjusting the action on your guitar at the bridge? You must have done, right? You've done it a bunch of times.
Well, only really the Strat.
Okay.
And to be fair, like, that's a lie. The Strat and the Les Paul. The Strat, the last time I set the Strat up was about a year ago properly, and I did do my my saddles. Obviously, like you said, you kind of got to credit Leo Fender here with, you know, being such a great innovator that he knew how to design that early tremolo system that they, you know, that most tremolos are kind of still based around now on Strats. That it is easy to set up, really, when you think about it logically, you know, because it's not just about the height of the saddles, but you can individually set them quite easily so that you maintain the radius of the fretboard, which I can't do on my Les Paul. My Les Paul, I can only adjust the saddle height either side of the saddles. So on the, you know, on the low side or the high side, and it maintains a particularly flat radius, you know, because the saddles are all next to each other. You can't adjust the height of the saddles. You can only adjust the forwards or backwards, so you can only adjust like the length of the string effectively for intonation. So the Les Paul, I have to adjust that every time because, and I don't think I do it very well. Yeah, every time I have to. Well, basically because when I take my strings off, the saddle falls off, and then sometimes the screws will move themselves, and I'll tend to find I'll put it back on, and I'll put the strings back on, and I'm like, oh, this is way too low. It's kind of dropped down, and then what I end up doing is I know where on my neck above the 12th fret where things choke out the most because of, you know, 20 years of playing in the key of A in a blues band. So what I actually tend to do is I kind of play up there, and if things are choking out, I'll loosen my strings off, and I'll just raise it a turn, and then I'll keep going, and I'll just raise it until it stops choking out. Instead of it being a particular measurement, what I really should do is give that guitar the treatment it deserves, which is a proper fret dress and recrowning of the existing frets, and get everything flat, and then it probably would benefit from an upgraded Tune-O-Matic bridge system, to be fair. But anyway, sorry, I'm doing the same thing I did last time, which is going down a rabbit hole instead of just saying yes or no.
No, I love that. I love that. And we're exactly going to cover those two elements that you spoke about. But just touching on something that you said there, which I think is actually a really, really point well made, is around adjusting the action, and I think a lot of people are doing it at the bridge and checking it by as and where it chokes out. Now, my kind of argument towards this might be that if the frets are really nicely leveled and crowned and you know, immaculately done, you should probably be able to take that action lower than you would want it to be without it choking out. That's right. And then you'd be raising it from a feel perspective rather than it's gone too low and it's choking out, and so now I've got to raise it up. Because oftentimes, and I've seen guitars like that where I've said to people, look, the frets aren't brilliant, but we'll try and give them a buff and polish, etc. But if you're asking me to give this guitar a really low action, recognize that we might be limited because you've got some uneven fret wear here going on and some not level frets. And if you don't want to invest in the expenditure of a full fret level and recrown and polish, then it might only be able to go as low as possible before it starts choking out, exactly as you've said.
You can only go as low as the highest fret, can't you, really? So
exactly. So that is something worth bearing in mind, which is, you know, if after having a go at some of these steps to get your action right, and it's still, you're going, well, I'm doing this and I'm following the measurements and the advice the guys are giving, but my action is just, it's just choking out and it's buzzing and all of that, then you might have some fret stuff that needs the attention of a tech to sort out. So yeah. And incidentally, that thing around the bridge falling off, just a couple of elastic bands, mate, just to tether it onto the posts when you do your string change will stop it falling off, and stop you having to necessarily adjust each time. But to be honest, I tweak it each time I do a string change as well in any case, because oftentimes putting a new set of strings on has a slightly different tension, minute, but perceptible on the truss rod and sometimes the action. So knowing these little steps we're talking about and doing them each string change, once you get into the routine of it, you do it really quickly and it's easy.
Yeah.
But there are two types of, in the main, the two types of bridge that you mentioned exactly, which is the kind of Gibson Epiphone type bridge, which is effectively a 2-point adjustment at either end of the bridge. The radius of the saddles is not individually adjustable. It's already been done, or should have been done at the factory by the kind of shaping and profiling of. They have a radius on them, but that's all fixed and done already, right? So it's simply a case of making sure you've done step one, which we spoke about, which is getting the right amount of relief. Spoke about that last week. Then using some of the same tools that we spoke about. I mean, first and foremost, use your fingers and feel and play, 12th fret and upwards predominantly. How does it feel? Does it feel comfortable? Does it feel too low? What does it feel like? And then make your adjustments accordingly. If we continue with that kind of Gibson style,
okay.
Or Epiphone style. Well, there's a difference already between those two. The Epiphone Chinese, Korean type bridges like that will often have a slotted screw as the adjustment.
Oh, really?
Kind of mechanism on the bridge. Yeah. So yours will be screws and stuff on your Epiphone, right? It's a slotted screw, right? But on the Gibson ones, it'll be a little thumb wheel that you adjust. You're going to go and have a look.
Okay. I should. I've had this guitar 20 years. I should know.
Yeah, it's a single slot screw on the bridge, I would imagine.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, everything's pretty much a slotted screw. So
yeah,
what the stock tailpiece goes on to looks like it's got slotted screws.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's all you need is a flat screwdriver, and the right size one, so you don't mash up that nickel chrome plating on it. And that's it. That's the only tool you really need. And if you'd like, you can use a feeler gauge or a string action gauge to measure the action at the 12th fret and go from there. Incidentally, on like real Gibsons and things like that, it's not a slotted screw on the top. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's a little, what they call a thumb wheel, which is a little wheel that sits underneath the bridge.
Really?
At the base of the post. Yeah. There's no adjustment.
I do think I've kind of got the same thing. I don't know if it's easy for me to show you, but
I'm going to try and have a look on your Zoom and see.
See, underneath where the saddles are, there is like a thumb wheel, a very thin thumb wheel. I can kind of see it on the Zoom that you're showing me. I don't think that turns and adjusts. I think it's all I think that might be maybe it does. Yeah, it does. It turns. Yeah.
Oh, you got a thumb wheel as well on yours.
I think so.
So you got a slot and a thumb wheel.
It definitely is a slot on the top, but I think you're right. The Gibson doesn't. Maybe the Gibson doesn't have the slot.
The Gibson
I'm just turning something that shouldn't be turned.
No, everything can be turned back. Anyway, that's it. I've labelled the point on that. But the point is, if you're adjusting the action on the Gibson ones, that thumb wheel can often be quite tight because it's the pressure of the strings pushing down at tension.
So you're fighting that tension. If you're trying to raise the action, you're fighting against the pressure. So loosen off the strings a bit. Exactly.
Just loosen off the strings a little bit, make your adjustment, tighten them back up to pitch. Or you can get these little thumb wheel adjustment wrenches, but I think it's better and less likely to slip and damage the top of the guitar just by loosening it off a little bit and just doing it. So anyway, that's all there is to say about that. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, in terms of measurements, what is the ideal action? I mean, it is quite subjective, right? But I mean, for a low E string, I would say I think anywhere if you're having a low action, it's something considered around 1.25 mil.
Mine's way above that,
right?
But I don't like too low an action. But 1.25 mil is probably well achievable.
So that's the action from the top of the 12th fret to the bottom of the low E string.
Right, okay.
As measured either by a feeler gauge or a string action gauge. But, I mean, some of the reference figures go for a high action can go all the way up to like 1.9.
I'm way above that. I'm definitely somewhere 2.5. I'm at least, I reckon.
Whoa,
above my
you're playing slide guitar on that. Jeez. Yeah, so that's pretty high. That's pretty high. So I took some reference measurements on, and so sorry for, and then it will differ for the top E string generally. So low action would be considered like about 1 mil.
Yeah.
On the 12th fret of the low E, the high E, and all the way ranging up to like 1.6 mil.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see there's a huge range there, but I would say dial it into maybe the kind of middle. Maybe start at around on the low E 1.5 mil, on the low E at the 12th fret, and maybe 1.25 for the high E, and use that as your starting point. And then you can kind of cheat it up or down from there, depending on how it feels to you. Yeah. And then, as you said, where it might choke out when you're doing string bends and things.
Is there likely to be any point where, because we were talking about this after last week's episode where we've done some of the truss rod right, and we've gone, and what we're saying is you do your truss rod, you kind of get that done, and then we're moving over to the bridge. Is there a likelihood that really, in reality, there's going to be an overlap between the two, where maybe you do your truss rod as best as you can, and then you try and sort your action out with the bridge and decide maybe just another slight tweak of the truss rod? Is that likely to happen?
For sure it is. For sure it is. And I'll often find myself... But what we're talking about is getting these things into the right ballpark by going through steps 1 and 2. And I would say that's a really good idea to just kind of go between steps 1 and 2 until you've balanced it as best as you can before you then start going and tackling the nut, which is to some extent a bit less reversible as a step. But to be honest, once you've got the relief set right, and provided your action was in the right kind of ballpark, not a million miles off, you shouldn't need to necessarily go back and tweak the truss rod. Okay. But I often find myself doing that as well, mate. Even once I've set up, once I've got step 1 done, and then I set the action at the bridge, and then I go and do the nut, and then get that cut nicely. Then I'll leave it and have a good play on it. Then I'll come back to it the next day and leave it. I might then go, do you know what? I think I can cheat it a little bit more and get it even lower just by taking a little nudge again on the truss rod and seeing then, is it going to choke out? All of these steps, of course, you can go backwards and forwards with. That's a good point. Incidentally, I gave some reference figures on my Les Paul last week for neck relief, because this is like as low as I think a Les Paul can go, and it's super comfy and low to play on. But my action measurements at the 12th fret are for the low E and the high E are both 1 mil. So they're like super low, and there's no buzz for my playing style. There's no choking out again for my playing style. Somebody with a heavier hand and a heavier technique may get buzz and all of that, but for me that's perfect. So there you go. It's pretty simple, really. Use the right tools for the job, and as I said, a couple of top tips: get some elastic bands to wrap around the tailpiece on a kind of Les Paul style thing to stop it coming off. Use the right size slotted head screw, so you don't chip away any of the chrome if it's chrome finished on your bridge bit. Make sure that you take the tension off the strings if you're doing it on a Gibson type instrument with the thumb wheel. Oh yeah, and the other thing to bear in mind is, as you're lowering this or adjusting this action, is also to check, particularly on like a Les Paul type guitar, but any kind of guitar that's got that kind of bridge and then stop tailpiece kind of configuration, is to make sure that the stop tailpiece as well is set at a position such that it's not fouling the strings against the back edge of the bridge saddle, if that makes sense. So if you pick up your Les Paul again that you've got next to you, so can you see that break angle that happens at the bridge saddle and then goes down? Have you top wrapped your tailpiece? Yeah, I can see that. I can see it. So we'll get onto that in a minute. But let's for argument's sake, say you hadn't top wrapped it and you'd slotted through the stop tailpiece. It would create a much greater break angle there. And sometimes what happens, and I see it a lot actually, sometimes what happens is the strings actually catch on the back edge of that saddle as they make their way down into the tailpiece.
So, if you've got one of those saddles pulled forward, then the flat top of the pneumatic tail, not the tailpiece, but the thing that those saddles are sat in, you can actually catch a string on the corner of that, couldn't you?
Exactly, and it can foul it, and it can cause tuning issues and all kinds of stuff. So, but that's more about just checking out how the saddle is, and then adjusting the stop tailpiece, because everybody's temptation with those stop tailpieces, and there'll be people shouting at me going, "Yeah, you have to do this." I disagree. Is to wind that stop tailpiece down so it's literally directly flat and connected with the body of the guitar, because there's all kinds of theory around it giving better sustain and better tone and all of that, which look, it may well do. The other way, I've seen some guitars where it's simply not possible because of the way the neck has been glued into that guitar. So this is a manufacturing thing, and I've seen it on Gibsons. I've got one Gibson where this is the case, where the neck angle that's been glued in doesn't allow me to have that stop bar tailpiece wound down anywhere near to the body, because the strings will foul against the back of the saddle. That's just the kind of way the neck.
It's a good point, actually. Because there's an angle, isn't there? Like a Strat is kind of like a slab, isn't it? Whereas a Les Paul, there's an angle where the neck is if you were to lie it flat, the neck's actually running down lower than the body, isn't it? So the strings are kind of coming up at an angle where they're moving away from the body. Yeah. So as you get the bridge at that high point, then see what you mean. So
the other well, it exactly is. It is exactly kind of that. And what I've had to do on that Les Paul, and I'm actually glad I did. I was a bit reluctant to do it, but I've top wrapped the tailpiece like you've done on your Epiphone. So that's basically where you put the strings in backwards into the tailpiece, and then they go back over the tailpiece before then going into the saddle and being strung up at the peg heads normally. And, people like Bonamassa, but many other guitarists swear by this on a Les Paul. It does a few things. It allows you to wind that tailpiece right down onto the body, because you've now changed the break angle that the strings hit the saddle at, such that you've raised the break angle, which means you can drop the tailpiece low, and I do think that does something maybe to the tone. What I think it also does is because you've changed that break angle, it also makes the strings feel a hell of a lot slinkier and I guess lighter in gauge than they are by doing it the other way. Now, some people disagree with this and say this is a myth. I guarantee you it's not a myth. So Bonamassa actually uses a higher gauge I think he uses 11s on his Les Paul, which is a heavy set of strings. Yeah. But he said, because I top wrap them in this way, they don't feel like 11s, they feel like 10s. And he's right. It feels so slinky doing this. So something for listeners to experiment with. Genuinely, it's a thing. And even if you're not top wrapping your guitar at the tailpiece, something else to play with is let's for argument's sake say you have got the tailpiece wound all the way down onto the body of the guitar, the top of the guitar, and it's not fouling against the back edge of the saddle. Great. Have a play at just raising it up a little bit, a few mil, maybe a bit more, maybe half a centimetre.
Really?
And you'll notice the effect it has on the string tension, for sure. So a lot of my Les Pauls where I haven't top wrapped them, I actually have the tailpiece wound up a little bit off the body, because it actually makes the strings just feel a little bit slinkier and nicer.
It does make sense, doesn't it? It does make sense to think that as you wrap a string around a corner, it would have something to do with its ability to vibrate and how tension manifests itself in the string in terms of those vibrations. So it does kind of make sense. But I've got to say, I top wrap purely because my experience is that I hardly ever break a string when I top wrap, whereas I would fairly regularly break a string before I top wrapped. That's it for me. I've never noticed for myself, I've never really noticed a tonal or a feel difference. Maybe I'm wrong about the feel thing and I just don't remember because it's been a long time that I've been top wrapping. But for me, it's never been a tonal thing. It's always been a practicality thing. That break angle being reduced over the bridge just seems to stop me breaking strings. I used to always break first or second string on the Les Paul.
For sure it will.
Since then,
it will improve that. And maybe adjust the tuning stability as well. Anyway, it's something to play around with while you're making these action adjustments. Is have a think about, do you want to top wrap or not, and see what it does for you. But I think it definitely does make a difference. Whether that's to your preference or not is a subjective thing. So we've covered action at the bridge, I think, for that type of guitar. And then you've got the Fender style bridge, which you mentioned, which obviously has the 6 adjustable saddle pieces. Yeah. And this is the bit that I was talking about last week, which I see just so much, is where people have had their guitar set up, or they've set it up themselves and they're happy with it, but they don't realize how much better it could play if the radius had been set correctly on those saddles.
Yeah.
And it's something that people often either just don't do at all or they don't do it well enough so that it's properly dialed in. And this does take a bit of practice and a bit of experimenting, but effectively, what you're trying to do is match the profile that those saddles are set at, not just the height for the ease of playing and the action that you want, but also the profile and curvature of those saddles, such that that curvature matches the actual radius of the fingerboard. Because once you've dialed that in, the strings just sit and feel better under your hand because of the relationship between your hand on the neck and the way in which those strings then are kind of following that same profile. But it also helps with bent string bends and where the strings choke out and getting a better lower action. So it's definitely worth spending some time with some radius gauges. So get yourself a set of radius gauges. If you don't want to buy the whole set, figure out what the radius is of your particular guitar, which will be in the manufacturer's specs. And just, if nothing else, just buy that radius gauge. And when you're doing your setup, slide that radius gauge underneath the strings. What I would do is make sure you get your low E and your top E correct to the height that you want them to be. Right, do that first, so you've got your outer edges sorted. And again, we've spoken about maybe the starting point for that. If you want to measure it, could be around maybe the 1.25 mil up to 1.5 mil on the low E. And 1 mil up to maybe 1.25 on the high E. Mm-hmm. Get those dialed in and measured, and then slide your radius gauge underneath all your strings and bring it up there, right up against the saddle. And basically, what you're looking to do is make sure that you're matching the remaining saddle pieces to the radius of
same radius, right?
To the same radius. So the way to often do it is without pulling up the radius gauge too hard. You've got it kind of resting, or it should be resting on the low E and the high E.
Yeah,
is to just raise up all of the other saddle pieces and then slowly, one by one, drop them down and keep playing them until they just start to buzz against the top of the radius gauge. Yeah. And then make sure that buzzing, that level of buzz, is consistent across each of the saddles. And you can often see it by eye as well, how the saddles are then kind of matching the radius gauge. And that's
right. Really. You've mentioned that before, of looking down from the bridge. Like looking down, I think it's almost like as if you're looking kind of down the barrel of a shotgun kind of thing. Like looking down from the bridge and kind of just moving it to see if you can you should be able to kind of tell that the saddles have got the same radius as, say, a fret or one of the frets on the fretboard. And as everything kind of, it helps to, make sure you've done it. Because when I checked mine Strat the first time, the strings were more or less already at the right radius, but not but not in the right. It was kind of like the low E string was too high and the high E string was too high, but not as high. And between the two of them, the radius was right, but it wasn't. It matched with the fretboard. It was kind of like it was off to one side kind of thing. It was poorly. Yeah. So it's not just getting the right radius. It's then making sure that they're all it's over the fretboard correctly, kind of thing. Yeah.
So the way I do that is as you've described. I do it from the headstock end. Yeah. So once I've done it, I kind of lay the guitar, or kind of put the guitar, on the floor, then lift the neck up so I can sight a line from the headstock end over the nut, and then in my field of view, I can keep the view of the radius of the fretboard, and I can see how that then is superimposing itself on the radius of the saddles that I've set. It's a weird thing to try and describe and do, but have a go and you'll kind of get what I mean. And I've never read anyone doing it in this way, so maybe this is just my own particular weird way of doing it. But this is after I've used radius gauges and feeler gauges and done all the measurements and then played it and felt, does it feel right to me? Then I kind of sight down the neck in this way. And to me, it's obvious when it's synced in, but
yeah,
there you go. And
yeah.
That's pretty much it. It's not rocket science to using a radius gauge. If you follow those kind of tips about get the low E and the high E in the right place, then just match all of the others to the top of that radius gauge, and that little tip around just playing each of those strings until they just buzz just the right level
onto the radius gauge, and then
you'll hear it. Yeah,
following the same curvature as your fretboard.
Yeah, and you can give them a little bounce individually, each of those strings, while the radius gauge is there underneath them, and you're pulling up on it with a kind of even tension. And you'll see if the string is in the right place as it contacts and bounces on the radius gauge. If you have to press before it hits the top of the radius gauge, you're still not there.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to. It's because it is quite hard to see. I actually I did it kind of like a slightly different way, where I had the radius gauge like pulled under the string.
You said?
Under. But I found that much harder to tell when I think maybe doing it your way is the way I'll do it next time, with this radius gauge over the top and bringing the string up to it, rather than bringing the radius gauge from underneath up to the first and the sixth string and then try and lower the other strings onto it. You
can do both.
Yeah.
You can do both. So the way I just described first and initially is to have it underneath the strings, and you're pulling up against it. And it is more difficult, I agree with you, to see.
Yeah.
But you can hear it. You can hear it when the string buzzes against the radius gauge.
Perfect. So then you're on to the point where we're starting to look at the nut, right, and complement it with the other end. But I've got a couple of questions.
Exactly. We'll do that next week. We'll do the nut next week, I think.
We'll wrap this one up now. But my questions to you, just to close this off, because what we've done now is gone over the simple bridge adjustment requirements for Les Paul and Fender guitars. But I just wanted to ask you, doing an acoustic guitar is going to be similar to the problem of you mentioned earlier, of doing the nut on an electric guitar, which is because you're having to remove material. It's what I would call a destructive works, and it's not something you can correct or pull back with a screwdriver. What is there any other approach somebody should take if it's an acoustic guitar? Is it just a case of, does it take it to a reputable guitar technician instead, or is it easy enough to do an acoustic?
I think it's pretty easy enough to do on an acoustic guitar. So what you will be doing is, if you're wanting to lower the action, let's say, is you'll be needing to remove material from the saddle. Yeah. So with the obviously with the guitar tuned to pitch and strung correctly, and you've adjusted the relief on it with the truss rod, have a look and take some of those measurements that we've said at the 12th fret on your acoustic. Now, for an acoustic guitar, for a kind of low to medium action, you're looking at, on the low E, about 2 millimeter between the top of the 12th fret and the bottom of the low E string, and around 1.75 for the high E string. Right. So that's for a low to medium action. Obviously, you can go higher or lower than that, but I would say use that as a decent starting point. And my acoustics, again, are set up pretty low, so I think they're probably, on the low E string, they're probably about 1.5 on the low E, and maybe even about 1.3 or something on the high E. But anyway, you get that measurement right. Loosen off the strings. You don't need to fully take them off the guitar. Loosen off all the strings so that they're slack enough for you to be able to pull out that saddle piece.
Right, got it. Okay.
Now, because it should just come out relatively easily from the slot that it's sitting in. Be careful if you've got like an electroacoustic with a piezo pickup underneath that saddle, because sometimes it might, the piezo strip might be not glued, but kind of just stuck lightly to the underside of the saddle. So you don't want to end up ripping out the electronic piece. But carefully just pull that piece of saddle out. It'll either be made of bone or plastic or something like that. And then what I would do is just get a really fine marker pen with a really fine tip on it.
Yeah.
And use a ruler and a straight edge to just take to just mark off about a millimeter. Or not. It's not even a millimeter we're talking about.
Point, yeah,
sorry,
it might be, you're bringing it down in stages, aren't you? I guess in small chunks so that you don't overdo. Okay. So then all you do. So that's it.
Then you just got to put it on a flat surface. Right. Put some sandpaper on the flat surface and just sand away, keeping constant pressure.
Sand away, constant pressure, so that you keep it flat whilst you're taking the material off that you need, and then maybe come back to it a week or so later to double check it. So,
just pop the saddle back in, see if it's made a difference. If it still feels too high, take it out. Yeah. Mark a little bit more on the marker pen. The point of using a marker pen is just to make sure you're not going too far, and you can keep track while you're sanding on how much material you're taking off. And you want to be just taking off fractions of a millimeter each time.
Yeah. So, and the other kind of bridge I was going to ask you about is, what about if you have like a Floyd Rose? Does the same principle still apply with Floyd Rose as like your standard Fender trem? Really, is it just more that the mechanisms are different that you have to use to do like radius adjustments and things like that? Is that really the only difference?
Yeah, it kind of is. The adjustment is different on it. And there's a lot more interplay with like the operation of the trem and getting that floated correctly first. And
got it.
But the principles around adjusting the truss rod are exactly the same. The principles around adjusting the saddle height, I mean, that's again, it's 2-point. You're not doing individual saddle pieces like on a Fender. So it's more like a Les Paul in terms of you're just adjusting at the kind of either extremes with a screwdriver like you would be on your 2-point Epiphone adjustment. The added difference is that you've got the interplay of how the trem has been floated and making sure that that's set up correctly before you. And to be honest, that's the same for any guitar with a floated kind of trem. Is make sure that that's floating at the right place for you first before you start adjusting it. But yeah, it's pretty simple on a Floyd Rose. Setting up a Floyd Rose and getting all of these things to balance and be in kind of harmony is more complicated a job. But yeah,
good. Okay, so that's Floyd Roses. We've done acoustic guitars. Have I got any more questions relating to?
My top tip for a Floyd Rose, by the way, is get a little hard piece of rubber or a little small block of wood or something, and use that when you do your string changes to push it underneath the Floyd Rose while it's floating, so that when you take your strings off, the back of the trem basically hits onto that piece of rubber or wood, so it stops the whole tremolo bridge just kind of tanking into the cavity, if that makes sense.
Got it. Easy peasy. So we're nearly there, mate. We've just got to get our nuts right. Oh, sorry. I'm looking forward to the one where we're talking about getting the nut correct on the guitars, because that's the thing that's probably, the Telly, the Esquire that I've got. It's got, it's a Squire and it's built really well and I love it, but it does definitely have a high nut. I'm certain of it. I'll send a picture to you so you can kind of see it. But yeah, I think that does need an adjustment.
Cool.
And so I'm looking forward to finding out.
Let's do that next week.
Yeah.
Next week, by this point, you will have all adjusted your truss rods for the right amount of relief. You'll have set the action so it's nice and comfortable for playing 12th fret and beyond, and it's not choking out. And you'll have tweaked that. And then the last bit is cutting those nut slots to get them just to get to that right sweet spot, so that then everything from the first fret all the way up to the 24th, if you've got them, is just in perfect.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe I will set it up for slide.
No, don't do that. Well, it's all the same steps. You just need a really high action to do it. So, I know. Yeah,
really high action.
I regret saying that now. You're going to go off and you're just going to go, oh, that's a good point. Maybe I just leave it as a slide guitar.
I can't be bothered learning to play slide. God, it's like a different world.
No, it is.
But anyway, awesome, dude. Well, thank you again for part 2 of that.
No worries.
We're on our way now to a really well set up instrument. Again, if we're following those 8 steps, which was about that was a more generic look, wasn't it? At this, because it was part of a bigger conversation. But at the end of this is going to be great. I think people are going to feel much more confident thanks to you and your help, that they can have better mastery over how they support their instruments and look after them.
Well, it's very kind to say, but I hope I've been clear with what I'm trying to convey. I've done it pretty quickly, but we have really knowledgeable and like competent people that listen to the show as well. We've got luthiers that listen to this show, right? So please, by all means, if there's things that you do in a different way, or that you kind of think there's a better way of doing it, by all means, take it to the Guitar Geek Hangout. Or if people are unclear about any of the steps that I've mentioned and think, oh, but you didn't mention what to do with this bit, then just shout on the Guitar Geek Hangout, and we'll and we've got a whole community of people that will help you, and myself included. So yeah, but have a go. Don't be afraid. Set your guitar action in the right place. Yeah, it'll make your day and your next gig.
Yeah, take my money. Do the work for me. That's what I'm going to say. No, I'm joking.
There is always that option. There is always. I'm trying, but you can save a bunch of money doing this.
To be fair, I did have this thought when I was driving up. I was driving up north. I've been doing a lot of driving this week. I've been up north and back with work, but I was thinking this, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, I'm not so certain I can do this, or I'm worried I'm going to do this destructively, or, my bridge and this, that, and the other is not, not quite right. And then, go and put some money in the pocket of a local reputable guitar tech, somebody who's done it thousands of times, and get them to show you, or, just get it done by somebody who, if you're worried about it, it's great. This is an amazing thing to learn, to look after your instruments properly, and to be able to get it done correctly, and to be able to understand how so many different things come together to make your instrument work. But if after listening to these podcasts you're hesitant, then just go to a tech. Spend your money. For sure. Put some food on the table of your local guitar technician, and just
that's right.
Get that person to do it. That's what I think, anyway.
I think that's good advice. If in doubt, do that.
If in doubt, do that. Yeah, exactly.
If in doubt, do that. But have a go first. Have a go first.
Absolutely, build some confidence. What could go wrong?
Certainly with what we've covered today, and provided you're careful with the truss rod from last week's episode, there's nothing that you will do that isn't easily reversible by yourself or by a guitar tech. So there's provided you're sensible, there's no damage that you're going to do with the guitar.
Fantastic.
Even next week's one, where we're talking about cutting the nut, if you go slowly and you go carefully, you'll be so rewarded with the results you get. If you are fearful of doing it and you don't feel you've got that level of confidence, as you say, take it to a guitar tech. But even if you have a go and mess it up,
for sure,
hopefully not on a really expensive instrument, it's easy to fix. It's easy to fix.
Yeah.
And a new nut isn't going to break the bank.
No. There we go. Anyway, dude, another cracking episode. Thank you for the advice. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, as always. Looking forward to next week, when we get to look at the final end of the strings journey across the guitar, and refining our action, looking at the nut, how we can make sure the nut's cut correctly. We're talking nut height, material, and nut slots, aren't we? And I've got a debate planned with you regarding Brian May and what he does for that. So
I look forward to that.
Yeah, I look forward to it too, because I'm interested to get your thoughts on what he does. Because when he built his Red Special, he took a very different and unique approach to the nut on the guitar.
He's a genius, so I'm sure what he's done is and a physicist. So, yeah. Who am I to question the great Dr. Brian May?
That's it, yeah. Us down the pub.
Sir Brian May now, didn't he get knighted?
Yes, Sir Brian. You're absolutely right. Sir Brian.
Sir Dr. Brian May.
Sir Dr. Brian May.
I'm going to go and see a Queen tribute band this weekend. Apparently, the Queen tribute band that has been endorsed by Roger and Brian and kind of set up by them. This is supposed to be the Queen tribute band of all Queen tribute bands. I don't know. I'll let you know how it goes next week. I've not seen them before, but there we go.
I can't wait to find out.
Yeah. There you go. I'll tell you.
Queen are fantastic.
Yeah, me too.
What a great band. Anyway, on that note, mate.
Catch you next week,
buddy. Have a cracking week, and I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers, pal.
All the best, mate. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening. Once again, have a great new year. If you like what you hear, then remember there are 71 other episodes going back over 2 years now that you can check out, where we talk about all kinds of things like best budget guitar amps, Murphy Lab guitars, a visit to the London Guitar Show, and our Desert Island guitar rigs. Go and enjoy them. Anyway, best wishes. See you next time on the Guitar Smarts Podcast.